Hey guys, so I've been shopping TVs for the last 6 months and I finally settled on a specific model, which is the Vizio M55. I really think it's one of the best TVs for the price, if not the best. So I'll go over the reasons why I think it's one of the best TVs in that price range, and then I'll end the video with some of the cons, just so you know what you're getting into when buying this TV. So first things first, this TV has a 4K VA panel, and if you know a bit about panel technologies, VA is actually a pretty good type of panel. It has great colors. It also has really good contrast since it supports HDR. The saturation is really good too, and that's possible with the XLED Plus technology, which I'll go in detail later. The TV also supports Dolby Vision HDR and the HDR10 standards, as long as the content is in HDR, and this helps a lot with contrast and color variations. Basically, you get smaller increments in colors, so you get a general better color reproduction. Another great feature is that it has 32 local dimming zones, so basically this tries to mimic OLED. So with OLED, each pixel emits its own light. In that case, there's only 32 zones of light emissions, but it's still way better than your typical TV, which lights up the whole panel all the time. So if you're watching a movie and there's a darker area in a scene, this kind of zone will be dimmed down. So generally you will get better blacks and better darker tones too. So that's a feature you would normally see in much higher priced TVs. So it's pretty good to have it in that specific model. Other than that, the finish looks much more expensive than the actual TV's price. So the bezels are matte, which I really like compared to typical black glossy kind of plastic bezels that scratch really easily. The TV also has metal feet, which are really solid, and there's 2 of them compared to the typical kind of center base most TV have. So that's really great, and it's much more stable. Another great feature is that this TV has a Chromecast built in. So that's something I would have bought personally if it wasn't included. So here that's money saved, and it's actually the 4K Chromecast, so the higher priced version. So it's really great. That's the one I was eyeing. So again, a few bucks saved. That's awesome. Now with a built-in Chromecast, this TV also supports the Google Home Assistant. So with vocal commands, you can, let's say, start a show, turn up or down the volume, play or pause what you're watching. Hey Google, play Stranger Things on Netflix.
Sure, Stranger Things from Netflix. Playing on Vizio M55.
So that's a really nice feature to have on a TV. This is only possible when the echo mode is turned off, so that the TV is always connected to Wi-Fi. So the TV will consume a bit more power, but still really an awesome feature, I think. Another great feature is that the TV supports analog and digital audio outs. So most TVs only have a digital audio out, which is great if you have a soundbar or a home theater system. But if you want to plug regular speakers, most of the time you'll need to buy either a digital to analog audio converter, or you'll have to buy a home theater system in which you'll plug the speakers. So with an analog audio output, you can basically plug any pair of speakers you have laying around. In my case, I had a Bose Companion 3 speaker set that was catching dust basically. It's a pretty decent PC speaker set, and I was able to simply plug it in since it requires a 3.5mm jack, which I could plug into the RCA connectors on the TV. So I didn't have to buy any other like audio gear to have my speakers working, and it's a better setup than the built-in speakers, which I actually never tried since I plugged my Bose speakers the first day I received the TV. So yeah, that's another great option if you have like some old speakers laying around that you want to give a second life. You will probably be able to do so with this TV. Also, the setup was super easy. There was no hiccups. I was actually expecting to have some bugs and stuff that wouldn't go super well. You have to download the Vizio app to do the whole setup. So basically you have to connect the TV to your local Wi-Fi network, and you have to update the firmware most of the time. So the setup was really easy. You can follow the whole process within the app. So I was able to see the update process on my phone as well as on the TV, which I thought was really nice. And as I said, there was no hiccups. So that's actually pretty cool. The built-in OS is actually pretty good. The menu system is simple and the remote works well. The animations are clearly not 60 FPS, but it's not really an issue, as most of the time you'll actually stream content to the TV or you'll plug your PC directly in it. So you won't actually use the menu often, but still it works great. The options are well labeled. There's not a bunch of them and they're easy to understand, so that's a great thing too. And about that mobile app that you need to use to set up the TV, you can also use it as a remote and it actually works pretty well. You get all the same controls you would get on the physical remote that comes in the box. So that's really awesome. You can really not use the remote anymore. There's also a rumble feedback according to the action you just press. So that's nice to have some sort of tactile feedback. You can play pause content, change the input, navigate through the menus. And there's also a real keyboard for searches. Let's say you use the Netflix app, you can actually search content better than the on-screen keyboard you would normally get with the typical remote. So this app is actually pretty useful. Now, as for the picture quality, if you compare it to other TVs in the same price range, it's really good. Upscaling is pretty good too, so even 1080p content looks pretty good. It's done with the spatial scaling engine, which I don't know what it does that's so special, but the picture quality is actually pretty good, so I guess it works fine. I tried to test 4K HDR content from YouTube. I don't know if YouTube actually supports the HDR kind of format from their videos. Basically, the TV was plugged in my GPU, which is a 1070, and it supports HDR, so technically it should work. So yeah, it looked really good, but I don't know if it was actually HDR content that was playing back. The TV also supports 120 Hz effective refresh rate, so it doesn't support 120 FPS content. It's kind of a simulation, which I'm not a fan of personally. I think that's what's going on when you set the TV to the gaming mode, and it seems to flicker a bit, so yeah, not really a fan, but hey, if that's your thing, it's there. So personally, I feel like Vizio really went in for the value. You can check on rthings.com, which is a website that reviews mostly headphones and TVs, and they really go in detail with each TV they review. And basically, it's hardly beaten by other comparable models in most categories. So yeah, it's a really great value for the money. Now we'll go over some of the specs. So the TV has 4 HDMI ports, only one of which is HDMI 2.0, so only one of the ports will actually support a 4K signal at 60 FPS. I would have liked to see at least like 2 HDMI 2.0 ports, but hey, that's not the end of the world. There's also a component in analog and digital audio outs, which I mentioned earlier. There's also a USB port for external storage. And the TV weighs around 35 pounds, so it can be easily wall mounted using the 400 by 400 VESA pattern. As for computer usage, it's pretty good. If you check on rThings, it's actually well rated for computer and gaming usage, although the input lag is at around 40 ms, which seems huge if you're used to shop for monitors. It's actually not that bad when using it. I played Ghost Recon's Wildlands on it, which is a first-person shooter, and it was actually pretty good. It didn't feel as reactive as my monitor, but that's maybe the placebo effect, but I was really able to play decently and didn't affect a lot, I think, my skills. So to do so, you must use the computer mode, as the input lag is perceivable otherwise. I tried to use the gaming mode too, but it was flickering a bit, and that's probably due to the 120 Hz perceived refresh rate kind of thing they use, which I didn't like personally, although it seemed maybe a bit smoother, a bit more reactive. And as I said, you really need an HDMI 2.0 cable if you want to game at 4K 60 FPS. Otherwise, you'll be bottlenecked at either 4K 30 FPS or 1080p and 60 FPS. So the TV seems pretty perfect as of now, but it actually has some cons, so I'll go over them just so you know what they are. So first of all, the TV doesn't have any TV tuner. Personally, I don't really care as I don't have a cable subscription, and even if I did, most of the time you get an external box in which the cable goes in, and there's an HDMI that comes out of the box and that plugs into your TV. So I don't know if it's like that where you live, but here in Canada it's actually pretty standard. So even then, it wouldn't be really much of a problem. Now, the biggest problem with this TV, I think, is that the viewing angles are not that great. So as I said earlier, this TV has a VA panel, and that's kind of standard for VA panels to not have super great viewing angles. I think that newer monitors that come out with VA panels are actually not that bad, but in the case of that TV, it's really not that great. So I only have one sofa that's not wide at all, so it's not really an issue for me, but if you have an L-shaped couch or anything like that, you might not enjoy as much the picture if you're not in front of it. Basically, the colors get washed out a bit, the whole picture becomes like super bright. Another con is that the TV doesn't have a lot of apps built in. Personally, I only use Netflix, and the other ones don't seem super interesting. And whenever you try to access the more apps kind of section on the TV, you get prompted to use apps that are Chromecast compatible on your phone. So the TV relies a lot on the Chromecast ecosystem. I personally tested YouTube and SoundCloud, and both worked really fine. And as I said earlier, the TV can receive vocal commands coming from a Google Home. However, not all apps are supported. So as an example, you cannot control the playback kind of functions with the SoundCloud app. I've also had issues with the Chromecast, so basically the controls don't work really well after a long period of time. Let's say you start a 1-hour video on YouTube. At first, you can easily control the volume using your phone, but after some time, it sorts of disconnect, I think. So you can't change the volume anymore, and you can't like play or pause what's playing. So you must exit the app manually using the remote, which is kind of bad. Another important thing is that opening the TV OS and apps is not super fast. It can take up to about 10 seconds, and it also tries to update the TV sometimes when you boot it up, which does take a lot of time, like over a minute. So it can be an issue for some people. In my case, I'm never in a hurry to watch TV, so it's not really an issue, but it can be for somebody else. However, if you open the TV to a specific kind of input, it's really fast. It takes like 1 second and it's ready. So that's not really an issue in that case. And lastly, the HDMI ports are kind of cramped. So most cables with bigger sleeve around the connector probably won't fit. I bought 2 cables in fact, and both didn't fit. So that's something to consider. You really need to use cables with slim endings. Otherwise, you probably won't even be able to plug it in. So overall, it's still an amazing TV. Now, this is the 2017 model, so we might get a new model soon, but I would be really surprised if they actually included many new features that would be worth the price difference that there will be at launch. So I'm not really scared of recommending it, even at this time of the year. I'll have links in the description if you're interested in buying it. So hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you actually liked it, make sure you hit the thumbs up button. If you didn't, let me know what I did wrong in the comments down below. Make sure you subscribe if you still haven't already, and I'll see you in the next video.